What if I told you the key to unlocking the most notoriously difficult sounds in English? The American R and the American L isn't just about, positioning your tongue.
Hmm.
What if it's actually about something deeper, like a hidden conflict between the unconscious muscle memory of your native language and the fundamental mechanics of American English? Welcome back to English from A to Z. Today, we're really taking a shortcut. We're doing a deep dive into the secrets of mastering the American R.
And the L, too, right? They share that struggle.
Exactly. And the crucial understanding is that this struggle is shared by the American L. We've got some phenomenal sources detailing this really comprehensive system built entirely around mouth posture.
Yeah, it's not just theory.
Right. This system promises a near-perfect R, not just on its own, but maybe more importantly, it shows how the R radically changes the sounds next to it, the vowels, the consonants. It fundamentally shifts how you achieve that true fluency.
That's the mission today. Look, this isn't just a simple phonetic exercise where you put your tongue here. It's about physically shifting the center of gravity of your entire speech system. Most language learners struggle with R and L because their native posture settings, that unconscious resting position of the tongue and jaw, they're actively fighting the specific tense shapes that the American R demands. They're literally trying to force one type of muscle activation into a framework designed for another.
So it creates this constant, almost exhausting friction.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack that core idea then. Mouth posture as the foundational barrier. Our sources really emphasize this. For many people, R and L aren't hard because their tongue muscles are weak or something.
No, not at all.
It's because the learner is constantly fighting the default, the inherent posture of their first language.
Precisely. Think of your native language posture as your physical home base. Every time you speak, your mouth just defaults back to this comfortable minimum effort setting.
Makes sense.
But when you revert to that home base, that specific tension, that tongue placement, you're creating a physiological environment that actively prevents the American R or L from forming correctly.
Wow.
These sounds are so disruptive because they aren't small tweaks. They are like postural hijackers.
Postural hijackers, I like that. So we're saying the R and the L aren't just one-off sounds you make. They require us to temporarily reset the basic American English mouth posture settings.
Right.
And they take over what you called the center of gravity for the whole sound sequence.
Exactly. And that concept, the center of gravity, it's crucial. In standard American English, almost all sounds are what we call schwa-controlled.
Okay, schwa. Remind us what that is again.
Yeah, for listeners who might not know, the schwa is that tiny, really indistinct sound you find in unstressed syllables, like the A in about or the E intake.
It's everywhere.
It's the most common sound in English. And it matters because when your tongue is in that schwa position, it's low, it's relaxed, it's full. This sort of low-effort setup is the default center of gravity for almost all American speech.
Okay.
So if you haven't mastered this basic, relaxed setting first, trying to achieve a clear R or L, which demands specific tension, well, it's almost impossible.
That makes so much sense. It's like trying to do complex gymnastics without first learning how to just stand stably.
Perfect analogy.
So that stable standing pose, that foundation, that's what the sources call step 0 in this R process.
Right. Step 0, the basic American English posture. If you can make a nice, clear sound, tongue low, full, relaxed, you've got the starting point.
But
That sound represents the correct relaxed posture that we then have to, radically modify and tense up specifically for the R.
And the conflict is immediate, isn't it? If your native language forces your tongue high and tight by default,
Yep.
then trying to force an R into that frame means you're already fighting step 0 before you even get to step 1 of the R.
That's the friction right there. The R is this high tension, really muscular, inward pulling sound, and forcing it into a native posture, that wants to be high in front or maybe low in back, depending on the language.
Yeah.
It just results in distortion. Usually it sounds too light or maybe too throaty, too constricted.
Okay, so we have our foundation, step 0, the relaxed sound. Now, let's get into actually building the R. Unlike step 0, where we want relaxation,
Right.
the R demands specific, almost surgical muscle engagement. How do we start building this sound?
Okay, so the construction starts with step 1, bracing and mid-body tension. And right away, we're intentionally adding tension to the middle sides of the tongue.
Which feels counterintuitive for American English, which usually aims for relaxation.
Totally counterintuitive.
So where exactly should you feel this bracing in your mouth? Is there like a specific spot to aim for?
Yes, it's very precise. The instruction is to push those middle sides into the inside corners of your teeth.
Inside corners.
Yeah, you should feel this pressure, mainly around the 4th, 5th, and 6th teeth back from the front. You know, if you run your finger along the inside of your cheek back there, you'll feel that ridge. That's where you brace.
Okay, that anchoring feels really important for stability, but I remember reading the middle body of the tongue has to do something at the same
And
time.
it absolutely has to. That bracing is only half of it. The crucial partner move is that the middle body of the tongue must also come up slightly intense up at the exact same moment.
Ah,
This simultaneous tension and slight lift immediately starts to change that basic sound. It begins to shift towards that characteristic or quality. It's like pulling a hammock taut. You brace the edges and lift the center together.
that hammock analogy helps visualize it. So a really common mistake here must be people getting the side tension.
Yep.
But forgetting the middle body, if you just push the sides, but the middle doesn't tense and rise a bit.
The sound just falls apart, or it sounds hollow.
Ah.
The whole middle structure has to work as one unified, tense unit. The sides anchor it. The middle creates the sound chamber.
Okay, sides anchor, middle makes the chamber. Got it.
So once that middle body is securely engaged and lifted, we move to step 2, tightening the front middle. The energy kind of shifts forward now.
And what's the action here? What do we do?
The focus moves entirely to the front half of the middle of the tongue. The action is to tighten that section and pull it inward towards the center line.
Pull it inward.
Yeah, it's often described like gathering fabric, you know, scrunching it up into a knot in the middle. You're collecting the tongue mass there and really centralizing the tension.
Okay, now this brings us right to that huge, persistent debate in language learning. The whole retroflex R thing.
Ah, yes, the curled tip.
Yeah, I know so many learners have been told you must curl the tip of your tongue back. That retroflex approach, does this bunched versus retroflex thing actually matter at this stage?
Look, the sources are really definitive on this. And honestly, it's a huge relief for learners. It does not matter significantly.
Mm-hmm.
The position of the very tip of your tongue, whether you curl it back the retroflex way or just pull it towards the center the bunched way, it doesn't really change the R sound much, provided you've done steps 1 and 2 correctly with the middle body tension.
Wow.
The sound is created by that tensed middle body, not the tip position.
So if a teacher is insisting you have to use retroflex R, they're basically teaching an outdated or maybe just overly prescriptive model?
Pretty much, yeah. If the bunched approach feels easier or more natural for you, absolutely go for it. Focus on the core mechanism, that middle tension.
That's really freeing, actually.
It is. Okay, so finally, we hit step 3. R takes over the gravity. This is the full formation. This is where that sound completely dominates the speech center of gravity, and it starts coloring everything around it.
So how does the back of the tongue get involved in step 3? You mentioned the front middle tightening.
Right. So in this final step, the back middle, the area that was doing our relaxed sound in step 0, it also starts bunching up and tightening, sort of mirroring what the front middle did.
Okay.
The result is you get tension throughout the entire middle structure of the tongue, front to back. That gives you that rich, full, resonant American R.
That sounds like a lot of tension in the middle. Doesn't that cause problems like blocking the airflow?
It absolutely does, or it would if we didn't compensate. This level of intense centralized tightening creates immediate spatial issues in the throat. And that leads us straight into the fine-tuning, the R postural blueprint.
Okay, this expansion into the full R sounds incredibly complex physically. Let's look at the subtle adjustments needed to make it work without sounding, strained or choked. You said the R dramatically changes the tongue shape. How does that affect where it touches the teeth?
Yeah, it's a big shift. In the basic schwa posture, remember, the middle body is relaxed and low. It usually sits below the sides that are touching the teeth. For the R, that pattern is completely broken. The middle body comes up, and because it's being pulled inward so hard, it actually moves past where the sides are touching the teeth. This upward and inward pull means we need to adjust the usual hinge contact point. Normally, that hinge is anchored around the fourth tooth from the front.
Okay, let's talk about that hinge detail then. If the sides are pulling in, they must have to shift their anchor point, at least for a moment.
Absolutely. When you pull that middle in and tense it up, you might feel the side slide back just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
It means the tongue might be anchored more on the fifth tooth now instead of the fourth.
And that's okay for the R.
Our sources say it's 100% fine, perfectly normal for the R. It's basically the only sound that allows this little backward slide, and it's purely because of that intense inward pull of the middle mass. Think of it as a temporary structural compromise.
Okay, a temporary compromise. I imagine it's not permanent.
No, absolutely not. And this is critical. When you release the R and go back to the schwa-controlled basic posture for whatever sound comes next,
Yeah.
you have to consciously make sure you return the tongue hinge to that fourth tooth contact point.
Well,
If you don't, your default posture ends up slightly too far back, and that will start darkening all your subsequent vowels.
okay. So it's an R-specific temporary adjustment, not a permanent relocation of your tongue.
Exactly. Very specific.
Now let's tackle those spatial issues. If the whole middle of the tongue is bunching up and tightening like that, how does the speaker stop the airway from sounding choked or blocked?
Right. This is where the back of the tongue and the top of the throat have to do some pretty serious teamwork. To keep that space clear, the very back of the tongue actually pushes forward into the middle.
Pushes forward. That seems counterintuitive, too.
It does, but think of it like a structural buttress. It supports that newly bunched up middle section from behind. It stops the whole structure from being pulled too high or too far back, which is what would block the air.
A buttress, that's a great analogy. So the back is actively pushing forward against the central tension to keep things stable. And what about the throat itself? Does it tighten too?
No, absolutely not. The top of the throat must not tighten. If anything, some speakers might even need to apply a slight outward push in the throat, consciously holding that space open.
Okay.
You need to make sure air can flow freely around that tense, elevated middle part of the tongue. If the throat tightens, that's when you get that constricted, kind of strangled R sound.
And nasality, can that be an issue here?
Oh, definitely. We should touch on the soft palate and nasality. If your native language is one known for nasality, like, say, Thai,
Uh-huh.
you have to pay extra attention here. You need to make sure the soft palate is raised and the pathway to the nose is more closed during the R. Otherwise, all that general tightening in the middle of the mouth might accidentally push air up into the nasal cavity.
And you get a nasally R.
Exactly. Which isn't the target sound in American English.
Okay, so that covers the inside mechanics. What about the outside? Lips and jaw? Are they just sitting there, or do they help out?
They're technically non-required details, but they can definitely help with clarity and projection. The R often uses the same basic front biased lip movement you see in sounds like or shush,
Meaning?
meaning you push the corner slightly forward, maybe lift the top lip a bit, and push the bottom lip down slightly as it maybe comes a bit up and out. It's subtle.
Right.
Now, you can make the R sound without doing that, but for at least half the learners we see, using this lip motion makes the R sound significantly clearer. It helps shape the sound as it exits.
And the jaw. What's the common mistake people make with their jaw when trying to get that R?
Trying to lift the tongue by closing the jaw, that's a fundamental mistake
Why?
because closing the jaw reduces that valuable space we were just talking about. The jaw should stay relatively low, maintaining that basic schwa setting, that open
Yeah.
posture. The lift for the R has to come entirely from the middle body muscle of the tongue itself.
Not from the jaw lifting it.
Exactly. If you use your jaw, you constrict the sound chamber. The whole tongue base needs to stay generally low and full, with only that specialized middle part bunching up and contracting.
No, we promised at the start to talk about the R and the L sharing this challenge. We've dug deep into the R's high tension, middle focused posture. Let's contrast that with its postural counterpart in American English, the dark L.
Yes, this is really important because the dark L is the other sound that completely throws off that default, relaxed, schwa-controlled center of gravity.
The dark L, that's the one at the end of words like ball or feel, right?
Yeah,
Or before consonants, like in milk.
exactly. And its postural requirement is totally different from the R, but it's equally muscular, equally demanding.
Okay, so how does the dark L posture fundamentally contrast with the R posture we just described?
Well, remember, the R required that intense centralized middle tension, and we talked about the hinge potentially sliding back to the fifth tooth. The dark L is almost the opposite. It requires high tension, way in the back of the tongue, and it generally keeps the front hinge anchored firmly on that fourth tooth, maybe even slightly forward of it.
So high back tension for the L, high middle tension for the R.
Precisely. For the dark L, the back of the tongue has to rise up and pull back, creating this sort of deep trough or hollow in the middle of the tongue. It's basically the inverse shape of the R's bunched, tight middle.
So if the R is like a tense knot in the middle, the dark L is a high tense back wall with the tip still touching up behind the teeth.
Exactly right. The tip makes light contact on the alveolar ridge, but the sound comes from that high, tense back position. And this is why so many non-native speakers struggle with both sounds.
How so?
Well, say their native posture defaults to a high front tongue position. That might work okay for a light L, like at the start of a word like.
Uh-huh.
But they struggle to pull the tension way back for the dark L. So their feel sounds more like feel, very thin, very clear L sound, where it should be dark and kind of muffled.
And the R needs that middle tension they might not have either.
Right. The dark L needs the deep back tension. The R needs the concentrated middle tension.
Huh.
Both require fundamentally shifting the muscles away from that relaxed schwa default, just in totally different directions.
Wow. It takes some serious muscle control to switch between those two complex, highly tensioned sounds while keeping the jaw stable and everything else relaxed.
That control is exactly what separates really fluent, natural-sounding speech from speech that sounds, well, strained or effortful.
Okay, so if the three-step process gives us a technically perfect R, the next layer, R coloring and preloading this, is what makes that R sound truly native and fluid in connected speech. It all comes back to that center of gravity shift we talked about earlier, right?
Absolutely. If the R sound takes over the center of gravity, it physically changes the quality of the vowel it's attached to, the one it's coloring or controlling.
So that's why the A sound in, say, car sounds different than the A in cat, even though they might start from a similar base vowel.
Exactly. The underlying tension pattern has changed because the R is influencing it.
Let's just clarify those terms again for everyone. We said American English is mostly schwa controlled.
Meaning that neutral, relaxed posture dictates the quality of most sounds. It's the default gravitational center.
Okay.
The R-controlled vowels are the big exceptions. They are controlled by the R posture instead of the schwa posture. The R posture starts to sort of restrict the vowel sound. It pulls its resonance inward and makes the middle tongue body rise slightly, even while you're still making the vowel sound.
And to achieve this seamless modification, this coloring effect, we absolutely need this concept of preloading. You called this the game changer for natural blending. What exactly is preloading?
Preloading, put simply, just means you start loading the muscle memory and the posture for the next sound before you've completely finished articulating the current sound.
So we don't speak in neat little blocks like sound one stop, sound two stop, sound three.
No way. We overlap constantly. We flow.
You use the word few as a great example of this overlap. The sounds are phi, y, o, o, o.
Right. So the $5 sound, that's just your lips. Your tongue is totally free.
Uh-huh.
So while your lips are busy making the dollar, your tongue inside your mouth is already getting into position for the dollar sound.
Uh-huh.
And then as the dollar sound is forming, your lips are already starting to round and move towards the ulnar position. This simultaneous preparation, this overlapping, it changes the airflow. It eliminates any audible break or gap.
So you're loading the Y under the F and starting to load the OO under the Y.
Exactly. And this is absolutely essential for tackling R-colored vowels naturally. We have to load that R posture during the vowel sound itself.
Okay, let's get practical. Let's apply this preloading idea to the common R-colored vowels. Starting with the O to dollar sound, like in car or star. We should probably note again here, our instructions assume the cot-cot merger, right?
Yes, that's a really crucial point for listeners depending on where their English comes from. The cot-cot merger just means the vowel in cot and the vowel in cot are pronounced the same, usually as that deep backed edula sound, like ah.
So if you speak a variety of English where those are different sounds, your starting vowel for era might be slightly different, but the process of adding the R will be similar.
Exactly. The preloading mechanics still apply.
Now, for every R-colored vowel, you mentioned there are two main ways to approach it. The R-colored preloaded version and the non-colored blended version. Why would someone choose one over the other? Is one better?
Neither is better, they just serve different purposes. Speed and maybe formality are the main factors. The preloaded R-colored version, that's generally faster, more fluid. It's what you hear more in casual, quick speech.
Okay.
The non-colored blended version is maybe a tiny bit clearer, more deliberate. You might use it when you're speaking more slowly or really emphasizing word. The core difference is really whether you start applying the R tension during the vowel or if you briefly touch back to that neutral schwa posture between the vowel and the R.
Got it. So let's do the AR R-colored version first. How does that work?
Okay, so you start making the R sound, that ah. But almost immediately as you're producing it, you start introducing that specific R tension we talked about.
The side bracing, the middle lifting.
Yeah, that slight back pushing feeling, the tension building in the middle. This immediately starts to restrict the ah sound slightly. It makes the ah sound more like R almost instantly. Then, from that R, you just blend straight into the full R shape, step 3. You completely bypass going back to the neutral schwa posture.
Seamless transition. And the AR non-colored version, how is that different?
Here, you start with a regular, completely relaxed R sound. You hold on to that relaxed schwa center of gravity.
Okay.
Then as you release the R, you very quickly pass through just a tiny, almost imperceptible bit of the center of gravity. It's like a tiny reset moment.
Like catching home base for a split second.
Exactly. It acts like glue. It helps the tongue maybe reset that fourth tooth hinge if needed before it immediately forms the full R shape.
Yeah.
Now, if you do this at normal speaking speed, you shouldn't actually hear that little ugh. It's just a postural transition point, not a separate sound.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move on to the airlar sound. This one's super common in words like first, her, bird, ear.
Yeah, and the starting point for the vowel part of airall is actually pretty flexible. It can often be somewhere around the L sound in bed, or the L sound in bit, or sometimes a mix between the two. It depends a bit on the word and the speaker.
So the ERRR colored version, preloading the tension again.
Yes, strongly. While you're making that initial RR-ish vowel sound, you preload the R tension. You should feel the tension building in the middle and maybe the back of the tongue right away. The vowel itself sounds kind of restricted, pulled inward from the start.
So it's not a clear E or air.
Not really. Then, when you leave the vowel, you transition straight into the full R. And here's a key thing. You usually won't hear that little linking Y sound that often happens when you move from an E or a taller to another vowel.
Why not?
Because the R posture has already forcefully taken over the center of gravity.
Yeah.
There's no space or time for that little yo glide. The R just muscles it out of the way.
And there's a specific hinge detail here too, right, that shows the preloading.
Yeah, it's a good indicator. Normally, E and dollar vowels start with the hinge firmly on the fourth tooth.
Right.
But in the R-colored version, because you're already anticipating that R pull, the starting hinge position might feel like it's slightly further back on that fourth tooth that's already primed, only allowing that slide toward the fifth tooth as the full R actually forms.
Like you said, standing right on the edge of the diving board.
Exactly. Ready to go.
Okay, then the ERR non-colored version. This is where that linking sound might reappear, especially if you say it slowly.
That's right. If you start with a regular relaxed E dollars or A dollars, keeping that schwa center of gravity, as you release the vowel, especially if you slow it down, you'll likely hear a small Y sound acting as the link.
Uh-huh.
This little Y starts out normal, like in yes, but then it gradually becomes R-colored as your tongue moves into the full R formation. It's a slightly less efficient transition maybe, but it can be clearer and definitely less demanding of that instant preloaded tension.
Okay, one more big one.
Yeah.
The OR dollar sound, as in for or story. Again, we're assuming that merged dollar sound like in caught.
Right. So for the OR non-colored version, you start in the regular dollar position, lips are rounded, tongue back is probably high.
Okay.
To transition, you release the dollar. And just like with the air non-colored, you briefly pass through that neutral center of gravity. It feels a bit like the release you do for the ori, diphthong, diphthong, and boy. But instead of redirecting the tongue forward and high for the dollar R sound, you redirect it immediately into the R formation sides brace, middle tenses, and lifts. That brief moment helps the tongue reposition correctly from the high back O to the mid-tense R.
Got it. Now, for the OR R-colored version, this sounds like it might involve the most tension right from the get-go.
It often does. Here, the dollar vowel itself is tense from the very moment you start saying it. It's heavily preloaded with R tension.
Where do you feel that tension?
You might feel it involving the throat more, maybe the soft palate feels tighter. And crucially, the middle of the tongue, instead of being in a trough like for a normal O, flattens out and raises slightly during the O sound itself.
Wow, so the O is already halfway to being an R.
Pretty much. Now here's the tricky transition detail for this one. It's a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
As you move from this tense O into the full R, the back of the tongue, which was high for the O, actually needs to be actively released and drop slightly.
Release the back while the middle tightens.
Yes. While the R is forming the middle, if you keep the back of the tongue too high while the middle is tightening for the R, you end up constricting the sound, blocking the airway, and losing that clear R quality. It's really precise, muscular coordination, letting go in the back while tensing in the middle. Takes practice.
Okay, so the R's power to hijack sounds definitely goes beyond just vowels. We see its massive influence on consonants, too. And probably the most common place this causes trouble for learners is with the flap D, right? Especially in words like water, butter, better.
Oh, absolutely. If you try to use a normal flap D in those words, the transition into the following R becomes really clunky and difficult.
Why is that? What's different?
It's because the R control flap D is fundamentally different anatomically from a normal flap D.
How so?
A normal flap D, like in the middle of city or butter when there's no R following.
Yeah.
That involves a quick, very light tap of the very tip of your tongue right against the alveolar ridge.
That little bump right behind your upper front teeth.
Exactly. But the R-controlled flap D, that tap point shifts.
Shifts where?
It shifts backwards because the R that's coming right after it requires the tongue to pull inward and backward.
Ah.
The tap itself has to happen further back to facilitate that quick pullback motion. The R-controlled tap typically occurs more where the alveolar ridge starts to curve upward and backward, heading towards the hard palate.
So if you try to tap in the normal front spot for the D in water.
You have to thrust your tongue forward for the tap and then immediately yank it backward for the R. It completely defeats the purpose of the light, quick flap sound. It often just causes the sound to become a heavy, awkward, full D sound instead of a flap.
Okay, so the placement is further back, but the technique still needs to be light, right? A flap is light. How do you get that lightness while hitting that back spot?
Yeah, this is fantastic technique detail from the sources. To make it easier and lighter, try tapping not with the very center tip of your tongue, but with the corners of the tip. Yeah, leave the very center of the tip relaxed and maybe even slightly down. The corners make that light contact on the back part of the ridge. This creates a very light, almost flapping in the wind kind of motion.
I can almost feel that.
The corners tap, the center tip stays down, and this makes it super easy to immediately pull the tongue back into the R sound without needing heavy muscle effort.
That makes perfect sense. The flap should feel like it's almost carried by the airflow, not forced by muscle.
Exactly right. Muscle force will always slow you down and make the transition awkward. Lightness is key.
Okay, let's move to maybe the most complex consonant cluster involving R, the $60 blend, like in street, strong, strategy. Here, the R's influence seems to span across two preceding sounds. That shows just how early that R posture can be preloaded, right?
Absolutely. Preloading the R posture right from the very start of a word like street can cause noticeable variations in the celery and the dollar sounds themselves.
How does that happen?
It happens because the R's posture, that bunched middle, the tongue pulling back slightly, is already starting to form while you're making the S and the T. It changes the environment they're made in.
Okay, so first the S sound can change.
Yes. The distoles can often become more like an SH8 sound. So street might sound closer to shriet.
Street, I think I've heard that.
Yeah, this shift started out maybe regionally, but it's becoming much more common across American English now. And it's a direct result of that R tension starting early and pulling the tongue body backward, which affects the airflow for the S.
Okay, and the T sound is also susceptible to changing.
It is. The R's posture changes, particularly that slight bunching and raising of the tongue body behind the T contact point can cause the duller to change into more of a city H sound.
Like train becoming crane?
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
a very common example. The blending happens because the inward bunched tension of the R restricts the airflow just enough during the release of the delegular to create that little burst of friction that characterizes the THH sound.
Yeah. Wow. So when a listener approaches a word like street, they potentially have, what, four technically acceptable ways to say it? Savistero, Sevi-Say-C-H-R, Say-Stare, or even the full double shift, Says-H-C-H-R.
Very much. All those variations occur naturally in native speech.
Which one should learners aim for?
Honestly, native speakers usually just use whichever version comes out easiest and fastest in that particular moment. It's often dictated by the momentum of the surrounding speech. The key insight, though, is that you can actively engage the R's lip motion. Remember that slight forward push of the corners?
Yeah.
You can start doing that right from the very first sound, even during the dollar, which normally doesn't need lip movement. That little front lip gesture acts as a signal to your tongue to start getting into the R posture internally, right from the beginning.
Okay, but if trying to manage all those dollars and TCH dollars variations feels overwhelming, what's the simplest path forward for a learner?
The simplest strategy is probably just to focus on making a good, clear, regular dollars. Then, put all your energy into executing that three-step R formation and the transition into the R correctly.
Focus on the transition.
Yes. A proper, smooth transition alone will give you a very natural sound, even if you don't consciously do the Z dollar, right arrow, SHE, or tie right arrow, TH2 preloading variations. The transition, getting smoothly from T into R, that's the real key. So just to wrap up this pretty extensive deep dive, mastering the American R, and by extension the L, really boils down to three fundamental breakthroughs, I think.
Okay.
First, you absolutely have to override your native language's default posture and tension settings.
Yeah.
You have to consciously shift the entire speech center of gravity away from that relaxed schwa towards the muscular R posture. And as we discussed, you need to recognize the very different muscular contrast required by the dark owl.
Right. Unlearning the old habits first.
Exactly. Second, you have to respect the really precise anatomical details we talked about, things like that temporary shift to the fifth tooth hinge for the R and the coordinated backward and forward pushing of the tongue mass to keep the throat space open. It's quite intricate.
It really is. And third, maybe most importantly for fluency.
It's using that technique of preloading. That's what allows the R posture to seamlessly color or control the adjacent vowels and consonants, achieving that smooth, native-like blending that everyone's after.
And the physical demands are pretty high. The R demands that lightness. We saw that in the almost flapping in the wind motion for the R-controlled flap D, but combined with absolute precision and real muscular tension right in the middle body of the tongue.
It's a unique combination.
Definitely. We spent a lot of time detailing just how complex the R is, and it makes sense. It's consistently one of the very last sounds that native English-speaking children master.
Yeah, that's true.
So that naturally raises a kind of provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away. If the R requires such a dramatic unlearning of native posture and tension, what other basic English sounds might be subtly, unconsciously controlled or distorted by your native language posture? Sounds we haven't even identified yet.
Good question.
And how might that subtle underlying friction be slowing down your speaking progress across all of your English sounds, not just the R and L?
Identifying that hidden friction. That's really the first step to eliminating it and unlocking smoother speech.
Definitely something to chew on until next time.